We originally met when we were both incarcerated in Santa Cruz County Jail. We found ourselves in treatment together, in aftercare together, and now our lives have crossed speaking together. It's with a lot of love and a lot of honor that I introduce Mr. Paul Maartense.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Nicole, for asking me to do this. Before I start, this is pretty hard to write, and it's even more difficult to present because I had to get really vulnerable to look at this subject. So if I stumble a little bit, or especially if I get choked up while I'm reading this, just bear with me, because I'm not so nervous right now, but I am feeling vulnerable. All right, so with that, let's get started. I stand here today grateful and enthusiastic to be able to share about a subject that I have over 40 years of firsthand experience in. I'm also mortified to be judged by you. In the end, I won't be enough. Take a look around you. 1 in 4 of us suffers from some form of mental illness or substance use disorder. I suspect this statistic to be even higher because of the stigma, shame, and denial associated with mental illness and addiction. It took over 30 years for me to admit the possibility of a mental illness, and 40 years before I was finally treated. Before being diagnosed, I told myself that I was just an addict. No matter what the consequence or repercussion, no matter how much time I had in recovery, my cycle would always end right where it began, using drugs one more time. I grew up poor. My parents were alcoholics. We were evicted a lot, homeless often, living in a tent, my father unemployed. I was always in a temporary situation, the new kid at school, the outsider. I would eat government cheese and soup kitchen food like I may never see another meal. Sadly, I also gained a ton of weight. And so I was the new, poverty-stricken, fat kid at school. A traumatizing trifecta in regards to being bullied. I was never enough, and I had daily confirmation of this from the kids around me. Growing up like I did exposed me to many things no human should ever witness, let alone a child. I've seen a man murdered. I've seen a best friend kidnapped. My mother raped, just to name a few. Needless to say, I entered my teenage years with some issues. I was constantly working overtime to gain approval, to be liked, to be enough. I was 14 when I first experimented with drugs, and that was the first time I can remember feeling happy and whole. I couldn't imagine wanting to feel any other way. I committed my entire high school experience to finding ways and means to keep that high going. At 17, I was in a car accident up here on Highway 9. I nearly lost this hand. I did lose my best friend, Jesse Michael Seligman. What had been weed and alcohol before soon became harder drugs. At 18, I was a heroin addict. To me, the biggest problem with drugs is that they work. They work wonderfully, up to the point that they decimate everything in my life, and I'm sitting in a jail cell trying to make sense of how it all happened. I've known I am an addict all along, but at least on drugs, I don't care if I'm not enough. You see, I grew up in a life where even Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny confirmed that I wasn't as good as my peers. I grew up wondering what I was doing wrong, why God himself was so good to those around me while he left me feeling so separate, different, and utterly alone. Of course I used drugs to change the way I felt. They were the closest thing to salvation someone like me had coming. But drugs failed me miserably. They too were just fleeting temporary fixes for the damaged, hurt human being I had become. For over 20 years, I have been going in and out of active addiction, telling myself that I'm just an addict. This had an implication that getting some time away from drugs would fix everything. That if I just stopped using, my life would be fine. It would fix the external problems. Many times I have cleaned up, gotten a new job, made new friends, new love in my life. Still, each time I would reintegrate into society, my insides wouldn't match what was happening or the perception that the outside world had of me. To them, I seemed like I had it all together. I was healed. Inside, I was a mess. Inside, life only got worse without drugs. I had little or no defense against things like a girlfriend leaving me or my parents dying. Inside, I was building a case against myself, and the verdict was always the same. I'm not enough. And around it would go. I would drink, puff, snort, or shoot just enough to feel happy and whole again, regardless of the consequences. Then just enough, it wasn't enough. I would use more and more, facing life and its responsibilities less and less, until finally I would end up in rehab, jail, or prison one more time. Each time I relapsed, I would try to change up the formula. I'd switch substances, the setting, the method, in hopes of making life work right for me. Each time I recovered from drugs, I would put in more effort than the time before. I would attempt new behaviors, methods, and means to make life work right for me. For 40 years, life never felt right for me. Every relapse, each recovery, became more and more hopeless and pointless. I didn't have what it took, because I'm not enough. Afraid of life, but scared to die, I talked to a psychologist a few years ago. I was diagnosed with PTSD, anxiety disorder, manic depression, ADD, and substance use disorder. Yeah. I argued that I was far too high functioning to possibly be living with this laundry list of mental disabilities. He pointed out that just because I'm used to living with them doesn't mean that they're not there. In recovery, at that time, determined not to use prescription medication, I utilized mindfulness meditation, group counseling, cognitive behavioral therapy, and individual counseling to cope with these disorders. I obtained valuable tools to better myself, and I began to mend. There was still a problem, though. You see, when you give a normal person a hammer, they use it to build a house, a fence, or what have you. Give me a hammer and I'll bury it in the back of my head, and then I'll blame you for giving it to me. The sharper the tool, the more dangerous of a weapon it can be in my hands. Operating on the false values of being separate, different, and alone, I misused all of the beautiful tools handed to me, and I ended up loaded on drugs one more time. Eventually, I was back in jail, ultimately being placed in another rehab facility, desperate to get life right this time. Toward the end of my 6-month stay there, I experienced a thought process that scared the hell out of me. Everything in my life was fine. I had a good job, friends that loved me, my daughter back in my life, and I was really enjoying the recovery community here in Santa Cruz. I felt connected and part of, but those thoughts, those visceral feelings of empty coldness were incessant. I was being held hostage by my own mind, thinking thoughts against my will. Thoughts that wanted me dead. I had 8 months sober at that time and was unwilling to take any chances. I finally got psychiatric help and was diagnosed as bipolar, as well as that other laundry list of things I had already known about. This time I worked with a non-narcotic medication and a psychologist to talk me through it. It took a few tries before finding the right medication, but we did find one. For the first time I can ever remember, I saw through clear eyes with no inkling of impending doom or inadequacy. For the first time, I felt free of, well, free of me. Free of the me that I was once convinced I was, at least. Strange things like hope, ambition, and confidence started to form and grow within me. Months passed by and I took a pill every morning and every night, while life became brand new to me, exciting even. Last summer I had a busy stint at work and I actually forgot to take that pill for over 3 days. The thing was, nothing changed. Everything was fine. Manageable. It was great, really. But I took that pill still. And then one day I forgot again. But this time I knew I forgot. Anxiousness, and fretting ensued until I made it home and I took that pill and everything was fine again. But it made me think, what's going on up here? So I talked to my psychiatrist about those experiences and he informed me that I was on the lowest dose of the mildest drug he could offer me, short of a placebo. He said that I was actually a candidate for a placebo, but he didn't want to take the chance of me having another anxiety attack. So he prescribed what he did, but informed me that I'd likely be fine without medication. Probably better, seeing that there are no side effects to taking nothing. So I stopped taking that pill, fueled by the realization that I simply needed to rid myself of false beliefs that limited my perception of the possibilities ahead of me. I just needed guidance, direction, and the opportunity to see through eyes that know I'm okay, that I'm enough. I still have ups and downs, but they're manageable. Working through the guilt and shame of being an addict with mental illness has allowed me to connect to others that share this challenge. I know so many people that are overcoming similar obstacles as I am. I no longer feel separate, different, or alone at all. In fact, there's so many of us out there that it's beginning to seem like what we are going through is fairly normal. 1 in 4 families in Santa Cruz County is affected by this disease. I'm here to say it affects me too. Today, my disabilities have become my strengths, my experience, my greatest asset. And that bottle of pills, it still sits on my nightstand today. It's kind of like a security blanket, but mostly it reminds me of what I've gone through to get to where I am today. And where I am right here, right now, this exact moment, this is the best me I can be for you. This is the best me I can be for me. And honestly, I'm tired of wondering. So I'll let you decide. Am I enough?